leveled against the same perpetrator or alleged perpetrator against whom she's filed a civil lawsuit or intends to file a civil lawsuit. That happens frequently. So I just had to say that because I know that's going to be a theme, a rallying cry by many defense attorneys. Okay. And I don't represent Andrea, that's obvious, but I do have a lot of respect for her and her attorney, Dolores Traiani.
Gloria, I think another theme or rallying cry used by people defending Cosby is that Andrea waited months, a year, to talk about this with police. Can you talk about that, the mindset?
Yes, well, I'll repeat your question, which is that, well, Andrea waited some months, maybe a little longer, to make the allegation against Mr. Cosby. Of course, we always encourage a person who is an alleged victim of an assault or rape or any other indecent act to seek the advice of an attorney first and also go to law enforcement and report. She was within the time limit to do that. If it took months, that's still okay. There is no law that says it must be done the very next day or within hours. I don't know why she waited. I don't criticize her for that. Often, for many victims, and I represent victims every single day, all over this country, often groups of rape victims that I'm representing. She's not alleged to have been raped here. Sometimes they really have to process it. They have to think about what just happened, come to terms with it, seek sometimes the support of family, friends, a counselor, a minister, a rabbi, a priest, attorneys, so many others before they make that decision as to, well, which option are they going to exercise? What options do they even have? And it can be very intimidating to go up against a celebrity who has an army of attorneys. In this case, for the civil case, he has 700 attorneys.
What?
Yes, he has 700 attorneys, Quinn and Emanuel. In our civil case, Mr. Singer was representing him, and then a few days after our deposition of Mr. Cosby, Mr. Singer was suddenly not representing him and substituted out, and Quinn and Emanuel with 700 attorneys substituted in, and as I said at that time, he hired 700 attorneys to fight one woman. But in any event, there can be many reasons why there is a brief delay in reporting or even a longer delay in reporting. Any other question?
You were filing for to take a second deposition based on questions that Mr. Cosby did not answer in the first deposition. Can you comment on his demeanor while he was being...
No, I can't comment on anything.
Not if he was evasive or anything?
No, because I'm an officer of the court and I have to obey the court, and the court does not want comment on that deposition unless and until there's a hearing wherein the court decides to lift the protective order. I don't expect that to happen in January because I know the court wants to also not only review the transcript and the video of Mr. Cosby's deposition, but the court also indicated it wants to review the transcript and deposition of our client's deposition, which won't happen until January 29th. So, no, I can't comment about any of that.
Boy, how stunned were you about today's action? Did you have any idea that this was going to happen?
No.
So this is a bolt out of the blue?
Well, I was aware there was a criminal investigation. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, but there's been a lot of criminal investigations.
That's true. And I was aware that there is a statute of limitations in Pennsylvania for the prosecution of a criminal case, and that statute of limitations required that there be a decision within a short time period. So I knew it would be within this time frame, not necessarily today, but within a very short time frame. But yes, I was stunned that it happened this morning.
And the idea, if it goes to trial, based on who he is and 700 attorneys and unlimited money.
Ariel. Hal. Bill. We ready? Okay. John, you want to All right, good afternoon. Today I want to announce some additional steps that we're taking to provide the safety that every resident deserves and rebuild the trust that our police officers need to do their job safely and effectively. Our goal as a city must always be to ensure the safety of everyone involved. To do that, we must ensure that our officers have the right tactics, the right training, the right technology to resolve tense situations safely and securely. It is about helping them realize the multitude of responses that are available in tense situations. As one sergeant in the 15th District said to both Superintendent Escalante and myself, there's a difference between whether someone can use a gun and when they should use a gun. And we as a city must train for that difference. These changes are also not the first steps that we have taken as a city. We announced that any officer involved in shootings will be put on desk duty for 30 days so we can assess their fitness for duty. That's a change from 3 days. I also directed Interim Superintendent Escalante and Acting Head of IPRA, Independent Police Review Authority, Sharon Farrelly, to review the crisis response policies that are in place so that we can see what needs improvement and what needs to be changed. Today, we're taking additional steps to create more time and distance in these situations and other encounters to make environments safe and safer for all. We will improve communication between officers and individuals to make these encounters less confrontational and more conversational. And we will double the number of tasers to 1,400 while also providing officers the training to use them properly. I especially want to thank the members of the Black and Hispanic Caucus for their leadership in pushing for more tasers. With the right policies, the right procedures, and the right practices, we can change our officers' perspectives to help them ensure their own safety and the safety of others. We want to ensure that our officers are not just operating in either first gear or fifth gear, but to recognize the degrees in between so they can respond appropriately to each individual situation, where force can be the last option, not the first choice. Our police officers have a very difficult and dangerous job. They put their lives on the line so the rest of us can be safe. And like all of us, they are human and they make mistakes. Our job is to reduce the chances of mistakes. That requires us to give them the right guidance, the right training, and the right culture to prevent abuses. Willful misconduct and abuse cannot and will not be tolerated. When that happens, it undermines all the good police officers who are out there and makes it harder for them to do their jobs effectively. Because at the end of the day, effective policing requires cooperation between the police and the members and the residents that make up the community. And that cooperation is impossible without trust. So as we go forward, all of us will accept nothing less than complete and total reform of both the system and policing culture here in the city of Chicago. I want to applaud Interim Superintendent John Escalante and his staff for working over the last couple months to develop these new policies. Today, the Chicago Police Department is owning, embracing, and publishing one of the most meaningful policy changes in their history. Obviously, we as a city have a lot of work to do, and changing the policing culture will not and cannot be done just overnight. These policies are not the end of the challenge. They are the beginning of the solution that Chicago has faced for decades. We can change the culture piece by piece, policy by policy, to provide the safety that every resident deserves and to rebuild the trust where it has been lost. And that remains my ultimate goal. While some may call this de-escalation, as Congressman Danny Davis said to me as we talked about this, ultimately what we are doing is injecting some humanity into the work of our police department and the police officers. That is what these new policies will help us do. I would now like to turn it over to Superintendent John Escalante to provide more details about these policy changes. John?
Thank you, Mayor. This new policy change is change fundamentally in the way we approach incidents. And it is based on the most important principle of the Chicago Police Department, and that is to preserve life and the safety of all persons involved. That includes citizens and police officers as well. In coming up with this new policy, we looked at 15 other major police departments around the country for best practice. Some of those departments include New York Police Department, Seattle, Portland, Cincinnati, Cleveland. That's just to name a few. Our goal is to change the way officers think when they approach a critical incident by establishing time and distance to allow for more prudent thinking and physical space to promote a safer environment. Communication, verbal skills, talking more to individuals involved so that a relationship can be established in a less aggressive or confrontational manner. We're also going to be emphasizing calling in additional police personnel whose training, appearance, and tactics can complement communication efforts in a critical encounter and help diffuse tension points to gain better control. We expect that every police officer develops and displays skills and abilities that allow them to help dissolve confrontations by using the least amount of physical or lethal force necessary. Thank you.
Bill?
Why would these moves reduce police brutality?
Okay. Do you want to go to that, and I'll just come in right after you?
Sure. To be more specific, this is going to be mitigation or de-escalation techniques that are going to be emphasized at all levels of our use of force module. So we have a use of force module that begins with the officer's presence on the scene and giving verbal direction. And it moves up from there. Each level goes up. So the next level is where an officer literally physically has to put their hands on an individual. That may include to perform a handcuffing technique or a physical restraint that is taught at the academy. And of course, it goes up to the use of OC pepper spray or a baton or a taser, and all the way up to, of course, the lethal force. These mitigation and de-escalation techniques are now going to be built into each layer, so that it's always going to be an option for the officers that as they move up the layer, each layer of use of force, that we're reminding them to always consider the de-escalation techniques. And we do believe that'll help reduce the physical confrontations and hopefully as well the use of lethal force.
Bill, just let me just add one comment there, and that is I want to underscore, I said it in the speech to City Council, but it struck me, and I said it here again. Just because you train that you can use force doesn't mean you should. And helping officers have that distinction in the training that goes with it is essential, because every encounter is a learning experience, both for the officer, but more importantly for the residents. Ultimately, you want them to go away with a feeling that they can trust the police department, trust that officer, and with a sense that that is somebody that is they can work with, because that is essential for the safety and security, because you need cooperation between the police department and the community that they're a part of, and they're asked to provide safety and security. And many times, you want to have a police officer knowing the difference where if the situation is here, you don't want it to rise here because of something they've done. And if it is at a higher pitch, so to say, how to take that down and to echo or something I said is create both time and space so that you can actually take a situation down in the temperature where there's less confrontation and more of a conversation in that effort. Hal?
I got a two-part question dealing with tasers. According to the current general orders at the police department, officers that already have been trained in tasers said they will, use the word will, carry tasers. Has that not been the case for today? And if you are gonna have a policy where every officer who is out on the street is gonna carry a taser, how will you enforce that and make sure that they actually do that? And secondly, in other cities where they've used tasers, some studies have shown that there has been
Hal, this is
no-
beginning to feel like a three-part question.
I'm trying to fill in for transparency.
Yeah. Well, when she comes back, I'll know that you've done a good job for her in the holiday season.
Colleague.
Okay, yeah.
And,
Are you channeling her right now? Okay, go ahead.
oh boy.
Okay.
The second part is, in these other cities, it's shown that it hasn't necessarily reduced shootings. Do you believe it will actually reduce
You go
shootings?
first, and I'll go right behind you.
Yep, so I'll try to answer that as best I can. So, yes, we do have a policy that I reissued on Monday, reminding our department members of our current TASER policy. And that does require that as long as there is a TASER available and there is an officer certified to carry the TASER does go out. So that order was reissued again on Monday. As far as the question of is the policy being followed? I do believe it's being followed, but we had to ensure that it's being followed by reissuing the order, and we expect full compliance with it.
Let me just, Hal, I think I would have, let me give you a three-part answer, if I could. But on a serious note, we have about 700 tasers in the city. We're going to go to 1,400. Is to make sure that every vehicle out there during the night has a taser in that vehicle. I think obviously if you have 8 officers, like in the Laquan situation, taser, and none of them have it, we have a problem, and it has to be addressed. Part of what I'm trying to do, and what John's trying to do in everything, there's no area that's off from making changes and reforms and looking at asking some fundamental questions. I want to caution, though, tasers, like cameras, are technology. They're a tool in the toolbox. They are not the toolbox. Issuing a taser to the cars without the training would not be sufficient. Issuing tasers and having training but not have the policy changes about, as Superintendent Escalante would say, without de-escalation, but I would call about how to deal with the multiple situations in different ways, it would not work. Now, the taser and the policy we're announcing today go together somewhat like hand and glove, and they work together. It gives officers, to use the example or the anecdote that John Escalante was talking about, which is as you go up, it's another option. The goal first is to create a situation where you're not getting anywhere and that everybody goes home safely. You know, a lot of officers in general are trained to make sure that they get home safely. When you take this all together, everything we're talking about here, what was said the other day, the goal is to make sure everybody goes home safely. Everybody from every encounter, and that's what we're trying to do, policy by policy and change by change, both through the policies we announce and the leadership to enforce and make sure that they're being executed. Lauren, and then I'll go over, okay?
I have a question for the superintendent, actually, it's another two-part.
Getting used to this, yes?
Yep.
Okay.
Can you just walk us through exactly what happened on Saturday, as far as you know? And the follow-up to that would be, can you explain exactly what happens in the police department when someone kills someone accidentally?
Sorry, ma'am.
You know, what happens after that, what the policies are, et cetera.
I could probably go into a little more detail on the second part than I can with the first part. In regards to the first part of your question, though, at this point, I honestly have to defer where the investigation is right now to the Independent Police Review Authority, because they, at this point, have had the responsibility for conducting that follow-up investigation in regards to use of force. So a lot of your questions really have to be answered by IPRA at this point. As far as what we do when an officer is involved in a police shooting and it's a fatal shooting, the new policy, which we just implemented, I put into effect this past Saturday, is going to take a officer out of normal field duties for a minimum of 30 days. The old policy, it was actually 72 hours. So within 4 days after a shooting incident and a fatal shooting, officers were back to work and on the street. This 30-day policy serves multiple purposes. First, of course, we always want to make sure that an officer is mentally, emotionally, and physically capable of returning to duty. And 72 hours we really didn't believe was the proper amount of time to evaluate that. So giving us 30 days gives us more time to see how the officer is doing. But within those 30 days, we're going to make sure that the officer has the ability to seek the professional counseling that we have set up through the department. There's going to be a retraining that the officers will be required to attend that will also have them requalify on the range. We're going to leave them in their unit of assignments where their coworkers and supervisors better know what their normal daily activities are like so that they can identify any issues that they see. And by taking someone off the street for 30 days, this will allow IPRA or the state's attorney's office to conduct a more thorough preliminary investigation in case they need to recommend to me that they believe an officer should be relieved or stripped of their police powers.
Mayor, I wonder if you would address two things. And I just want to give you a chance to address what the superintendent said was really an chance, because this happened while you were gone. Just would you give us what your thoughts are, your reaction to the fact that an innocent citizen was shot during a police operation? But secondly, I think what we're getting here, the tenor of what we're hearing is that we're going to much smaller cities to look at their models of policing. And does that mean Chicago is somewhat behind the learning curve for what's being done across America?
Well, first of all, I think, let me take your second question first. And I was, when John and I talked about this, first of all, New York has looked at this.
But I think Portland, Cleveland, some of the other cities.
Well, I think, here's what I would not look at the size of the city, if I could. It's just, the way I looked at it is if you take a look at this policy, and if you talk to anybody that's been involved in both from an academic standpoint and a professional standpoint on policing, every one of the cities have gone through or are going through some change with the Department of Justice. And rather than not just wait, but this is one of, not the only, end results in the training and reforms of police departments is that they don't just have kind of a use of force policy, they have a more nuanced, more policy as it relates to how the police interact with residents in the community. So I don't look at it from size. I look at it in the sense of, you know, a Portland or a Cleveland. I look at it in two ways. First, these are a number of the police departments are police departments that have worked with the justice departments on practice and the reforms necessary. Two, we're going to look at everything we're doing from a comprehensive fashion. And if there's another city to learn something as it relates to transparency, if there's another city that we're looking at, I'll give you another example from Seattle. They have an early interdiction policy as it relates to troubled police officers. Just because it's Seattle doesn't mean we shouldn't be looking at it, because your force is different than ours. We're making changes, and the way you have to make a change is you also have to acknowledge you may not have been doing what you needed to be doing to deal with the type of police and the type of city we have, which is diverse and big. And because Seattle is a different size police or a different size city doesn't mean we can't learn a lesson from it. My ultimate goal is that we work through all of these issues and that Chicago is a model both in its police department and its community relationships, so that the cooperation which is essential for community policing is built on a solid foundation of trust. And if we're frank with each other, all of ourselves, we have a long history in the city. That trust has been frayed to the point that it's broken. And part of what we're doing here, and I believe we'll be better off at the end of the process, is build a police department that has the trust of the community, that is essential for the safety that those residents rely on. And I said two things, and just so you get a kind of an impression, and I'll go right there, okay, is when I first talked to Acting Superintendent Escalante early Saturday morning, he told me about what had happened. I was assured first that IPRA was on the scene, and then second, I asked if I could get the numbers so I could reach out to the family, which is what I've done. Okay.
Two-part question seems to be the order of the day, so I will keep on that track.
You just don't want to go with a, okay.
No,
No.
I wouldn't want to do that here.
No.
First of all, it has now been 3 days since these two individuals were shot on the west side, and there has been no narrative offered on the record by the police department in terms of what happened there. In deferring to IPRA, are you concerned that you are leaving a vacuum that will be and is being filled by rumor, innuendo, and street talk as opposed to something of an official nature from the Chicago Police Department? That's the first question. And the second question, in these reforms, these new de-escalation tactics which will be implemented, are you essentially acknowledging that the Chicago Police Department had either a shoot first or shoot too quickly culture and mentality up until now?
Okay, in regards to the question of trying to get more information out from Saturday's incident, I think what we did, and I still acknowledge today, and we did on Saturday, was it was nothing at this point indicates that this was anything more than a tragic accident, and it was a very tragic. There's probably not. That's not even the right way to describe it. Saturday shooting. But again, the investigation is the responsibility of the Independent Police Review Authority, and we have to be careful of what information we might put out that would jeopardize their investigation. The last thing we would want to be accused of is putting out information that's going to jeopardize a use of force investigation by IPRA. As far as the change or revision, which is significant to our policy, we're just looking for best practice, and by no means was our policy ever shoot first and ask questions later. Quite the contrary. And I think looking at these other departments and what they're doing, we're just trying to find best practice to minimize those situations where we may end up having to use deadly force.
Quickly follow up.
Can I just?
Superintendent, if these policies had been enforced on Saturday, when this shooting took place, these 2 citizens were killed, these de-escalation practices, might there have been a different outcome in that situation?
That's a tough question to answer, and honestly, I'd be speculating if I tried to answer it, because I don't have all the details right now of what IPRA's investigation, now going on its 4th day, has uncovered. So we may know that once IPRA is done, but at this point, I would only be speculating, and I really couldn't guess.
You have let me try the first part about rumor to the integrity of IPRA's investigation. Just like the public, we want answers and we want them now. And yet you also have to know that IPRA has to have the integrity to do their job and do it thoroughly. And there's a conflict there, but you have to respect that work, because at the end of the day, it's essential for going forward, because if there's discipline or other type of actions that are necessary beyond discipline, that work has to get done. It is frustrating, and I share that frustration. On the other hand, it's also cautioned by they need the time to get their work done and get it done right, rather than in any way be rushed to a conclusion. I would offer to you that, look, if you step back, every city is going through a change in police practice, tactics, and also culture. Chicago's not unique that way. Chicago has its own history. When you go back all the way 40 to 50 years, we have a unique take on it, and we have to be acknowledged on that. I would say that the training and the changes we're making today, ultimately get to a place where there's a trust level reestablished between the community and the police department, which I think is essential for good community policing and the safety of the residents want to see. But more importantly, that the training we try to do for our officers in Chicago has to be up to the capacity to all the different types of encounters that they're going to have. And it may not have been, just like other police departments are finding that out themselves. And the first step in making a change is acknowledging it may not have been exactly right. In fact, it may have been off the mark, or we may not have been doing this. I think, if I'm not, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think the state requires 400 plus hours of training. We do like a little over 900 in the city of Chicago, north of 900 hours of training. Maybe that, not maybe, that has to be altered to make sure we're getting the best from our police department, and we're providing them the best resources, both of training, but also oversight, holding them accountable. And when an officer, an individual, is not meeting the professional standards, they not only have to be disciplined, but they undermine all the other officers who are doing it, because their effectiveness as officers is based on the trust level they have with the residents. Mike?
Mayor, while you were gone, it was announced that the police department's gonna train another 910 officers this year, 2016, and provide them with a crisis intervention. Right now, we have about 15% of the force trained. If my math is right, this will take us up to about 20 or 21%. San Antonio allegedly trains every one of its officers. Miami-Dade, 75% of their officers have this training. Do you think it's valuable enough that every officer ought to have it? And if a year from now we're only gonna be at 20%, how soon will it be more widespread?
Do you want to go through some of the numbers that we're going to do? And then I'm going to go to that.
Yeah, the training, we do have 26 training classes scheduled for 2016. Those are 40-hour training sessions that certify the officers as crisis intervention trained. Our goal is to get those frontline officers, the officers that literally work the beat car, those are the ones that are going to respond well before anybody else. They have to get the training first, and that's what we're looking for 2016. Our newly promoted supervisors, we have 100 sergeants that will be graduating and hitting the streets, I believe, on February 1st. Those supervisors went through the training. Future promotions, we have lieutenants and captains class coming up, will go through the training. So we take every opportunity available that we can to put our people through the training. But again, our primary goal is to get those beat officers, the first responders to any call for service in the training.
For the next few years, I mean, how soon might we get to 40 or 50%?
I don't have a timetable, but we,
The advocates say you need one officer in every district on all the shifts, and we're not there. We're far short of that.
yeah, no, we do. We actually do. We have it broken down by district, by watch, by unit, not just the patrol district, but we have multiple officers on every district, on every watch that are crisis intervention. In fact, on my way here, and I left 35th and Michigan at noon, was monitoring the zone for the 2nd District. A call came out for an individual that was having mental health issues, and the dispatcher assigned it to a car, and she verified that the officers were crisis intervention trained. That's why we need to get those officers trained first.
Mike, just to also add, one of the things that, so to get the sense that this is comprehensive, talk to you about the sergeant class coming up, the graduating, the lieutenants, also the available hours we're going to do. You know, in addition to that, I've also directed that we all talk about the police officers. I'm also including in this is the 911 callers, because from the call coming in to the relayed information to the police officer, they got to provide the police officers with an accurate meaning. Is also
Ask the caller, is there a mental health element?
just so the officer, just so the caller who is the link between the first phone call to the dispatch of the officer who's now going to be sent, that nothing is missed that's essential for how an officer responds. And I don't want to belabor this, but it's actually relevant to what we've talked about today. Because if you're going in with one expectation and you don't have all the information, how you deal with that situation, because you're coming in with a certain amount of information from an expectation standpoint, is going to be important. Because if you do have the information that involves, in one case, maybe mental health, you're going to be dealing with it with a different level of expectation, and your training will be called upon in a different way. Go ahead.
Mayor, you could have made these changes years ago when you first took office. Why didn't you?
Well, here's we've done a couple of things over the 4 years. One of them is, in my view, is taking in the politics out of how promotions were done in Chicago and making it based on performance and the meeting a performance standard from a public safety. I would also say that if you look at, we implemented and issued the SAFER report. We came after months of negotiation, unprecedented for any police department in the city of in the country. City of Chicago and the ACLU reached an unprecedented historical agreement for the ACLU to monitor how we actually do stops, how we work across the city in an equal way responsively. We haven't, as a city, done everything we have to under my tenure. But anybody would tell you the challenges that Chicago is facing, its police department, its city, is not only not unique, it's not over just 4 years, it's 4 or 5 decades in the making. And the changes that we're trying to do will also not just be done in 4 years, but we will finish the job top to bottom in completely doing the effort. I would say, like in the past, IPRA, Independent Police Review Authority, came from an incident in 2007. Was that enough? Retrospect? No. Do I believe today we have the opportunity to, in a fundamental way, make fundamental changes? Yes, and I intend to see them from start to finish. Paris?
Jason Van Dyke, still technically a member of the police department despite being suspended without pay. Dante Servant, still on the job despite the superintendent moving to fire him because they both have to go through police board hearings that we're told could take up to a year. Why is it so hard to fire a police officer, and doesn't that contribute to distrust that these two officers can't be relieved of their jobs?
Yeah, I think, Paris, I would say, as you know, when I appointed the task force, which will be reporting at the end of March, we have 3 entities to deal with oversight, accountability, and discipline. One is internal in the police department, one is the IPRA, Independent Police Review Authority, and the other one is the police board. One of the tasks that I've assigned Lori and her and the group of prosecutors, police officer, and public defender is we have 3 entities all trying to hold people accountable for their actions and to create a culture of professionalism. Is this the right structure, and why is it not working? And you asked some core questions that we've asked, actually, and the task force will be addressing and speaking to. Go ahead. Hold on one second, Sarah. Sorry about that.
Clear something up. Did you say every vehicle is going to have a taser or every officer?
Okay.
And also,
You want to go to that?
apparently only 20% of the officers are trained in tasers right now. Where's all the money going to come from to pay for all this additional training and for the equipment?
Yeah, in terms of the numbers, again, I have 21%. Obviously, we need to get more, but again, what I failed to mention the first time is that all our new hires, and this goes back for the last couple of years, so anyone coming on the job, going through the academy as a new recruit gets the crisis intervention training. The certification is 40 hours, and again, that's what I talked about, 26 classes, but we're also looking into a more basic training for the entire department, which will not be the 40 hours, which would be an 8 or 16-hour course. Oh, I'm sorry, tasers, I apologize. Yeah, 21% are where we are with tasers, but we will double that. So that'll give us, we're at about 700 for patrol, that'll give us about 1,400. That'll ensure that every beat car that is responding to a call for service, those officers should be equipped with a taser, which again is just going to be an additional tool that they'll have available.
Sarah, can I?
It's obviously not every officer, it's not every vehicle.
Yeah, every vehicle will have it.
Not every, there should be 2, not much times 2 officers.
Yeah, but every vehicle will have a taser, but I do want to draw we're going to double the size of there's a little about 700 tasers. We're going to go to 1,400. But I would note, this is also from the situation of Laquan McDonald. You had 8 officers all calling for some backup for tasers. That situation will not, based when we are fully done and implemented, they'll be trained, they'll be dispensed and out there, and you won't have a situation where officers are calling frantically for a taser because they'll be there in the vehicles. Thank you.